Thank you for your interest in being an observer for Albania's 2015 local elections. The Central Election Commission of Albania and United Nations Development Program in Albania have produced this informational video. We think you will find it useful in preparing for your role on Election Day. This video is primarily designed to cover the voting day and the activities of a voting center and voting center commission. The video goes over duties and responsibilities of commissioners, as well as steps to organize and administer the vote. At the end of each section is a short quiz to make sure you are paying attention and understand the basics. The video is intended to supplement any training you receive from your respective organization, the official materials of the CEC, and the election code. We will go over the following lessons. Lesson 1, the Voting Center and Voting Center Commission. Here you will learn the basics about what is a voting center and the commission that runs it. Lesson 2, observers and media. Yes, you. We know you know your job, but we'll quickly go through some rights and responsibilities of observation for elections in Albania. Lesson 3, opening the voting. It's just what it sounds like, how an electoral commission prepares for and officially kicks off the voting on Election Day. Lesson 4, voting. Here we'll provide an overview of standard voting procedures on Election Day. Lesson 5, voting, special situations. We'll present some special situations and how the voting center acts in those cases. Lesson 6, closing. We will go step by step on closing the voting center and completing required documentation. This is probably the trickiest part of the day. Lesson 7, handover of the materials. We will look at what happens after the closing of the voting center when the materials are transferred to the counting center. Ready to begin? Well, you're almost ready, but first we need to emphasize the job of an observer is an important and serious one. Failure to act professionally can not only jeopardize observation efforts, but can also harm the voting process. We ask that you please refer to the election code and other information provided by the CEC with regards to observation, and to pay attention to your own organization's policies and guidelines. Now, let's get started. Lesson 1, the Voting Center and Voting Center Commission. In this lesson, we will go over what is a voting center and the Voting Center's Commission, meetings of the Voting Center Commission, decisions of the Voting Center Commission, and the role of the Commission's Secretary. Ready? Here we go. Albania has over 5,000 voting centers where citizens will go on the 21st of June to make their choices for mayor and municipal council members. Working in the voting center are members of the Voting Center Commission, or VC Commission. Each voting center belongs to one of 90 election administration zones. The Zone Commission, or CEAZ, organizes the electoral process within its zone. The CEAZ is the primary point of contact for the Voting Center Commission. Organizing the entire election and coordinating the work of each CEAZ and VC Commission is the CEC of Albania. Let's look in detail now at the Voting Center Commission, which is where you will be observing. A Voting Center Commission has 7 members. Meetings should take place only when a majority of those members, or a quorum, are present. In very special cases, the VC Commission can perform its duties with less than the required quorum, but only with the permission from the CEAZ. In doing its work, the VC Commission takes decisions through voting, decisions which must have the support of a majority of all members to be valid. Each member shall state their vote in favor or against and why. The most important responsibilities are performed by the VC Commission's chair and secretary. They take on a majority of the duties throughout the election process, as you will soon see. Basically, the chair directs the important activities of the VC Commission, while the secretary performs many tasks to ensure that the commission operates in accordance with the CEC's procedures and election code. For example, the secretary prepares materials for the VC Commission meeting and distributes materials to members, keeps minutes of the Commission meetings, and registers all decisions in the meeting book. provides certified copies of decisions and of minutes of meetings to interested persons such as observers and within 24 hours. VC Commission meetings should always be open to accredited observers. Let's review. Under most conditions, what would be the minimal number of VC Commission members needed to approve a decision? A, 3, B, 4, C, 5, D, 7. The answer is B, 4. A majority of the VC Commission's 7 members is required to approve a decision, regardless of how many members are present at any meeting. Only in the rare cases, when the VC Commission has been authorized by the CEAZ to operate with less than 4 members, would it ever be possible to approve a decision with less than 4 members. Which of the following roles is the responsibility of the Secretary of the VC Commission? A. Prepares materials for the VC Commission meeting and distributes them to members. B. Provides copies of decisions to observers. C. Registers the decisions of the VC Commission in the meeting book. D. All of the above. The answer is D. All of the above. The Secretary actually has a number of other responsibilities to do. You will learn that the Secretary, together with the Chair, is doing the majority of the duties at the voting center on Election Day. Lesson 2. Observers and Media. In this lesson, we will go over who can have observers in the voting center, observers' rights and limitations. Let's begin. All stages of the election day and activities of the VC Commission may be observed by accredited Albanian and foreign observers. Observers must have official accreditation, either from a CEAZ or CEC. International observers are accredited by the CEC. Observers should be free to monitor the activities of the voting center and not be interfered with by the Commission. There are some limits on the numbers of observers from any one organization. A political party or Albanian non-governmental organization may not have more than 1 accredited observer at a time in a voting center. A coalition may not have more than 3, while accredited foreign and international organizations may not have more than 2. Foreign observers can in addition be accompanied by an interpreter inside the voting center. However, the interpreter must have an authorization issued by the CEC. Observers arriving at the voting center should present themselves to the Commission with their valid accreditation and identity document. Observers may submit written comments to the VC Commission based on what they have observed, and examine any documentation or electoral materials. Observers should not, however, provide instructions or other advice to the VC Commission. Accredited media are also permitted in the voting center to make a short recording of the voting process. But in doing so, they must ensure that the secrecy of the vote is not compromised. Let's review. Who can have observers in the voting center? A. Political parties. B. Coalitions. C. Non-governmental Albanian organizations. D. International organizations. Or E. All of the above. The correct answer is E. All of the above. Provided, of course, they are accredited by the CEC or CEAZ and adhere to the limits on the number present at any one time, spelled out in the Electoral Code. True or false? Media is allowed to record inside a voting center on Election Day during the voting hours. It is actually true. Media are allowed to record a video or film, and even during the voting day. However, the recording should be brief and must never violate the secrecy of the vote. Lesson 3. Opening the voting. In this lesson, we will go over the preparation of the voting center on the morning of the election, the roles of the voting center commissioners. Let's begin. On the day of the election, all members of the Commission and interested observers should be present at the voting center 1 hour before the voting begins, at 6 a.m. Together, the voting center Commission members will first check whether the seal, which closes the voting center door, is intact. If the seal has been removed or tampered with, the Commission will immediately contact the CEAZ and the police. Observers should also check around the outside of the building before voting begins. VC Commission members should remove any campaign materials they find within a range of 150 meters of the center. While the roles of the chair and secretary are clear by law, the VC Commission must now officially divide other responsibilities of the election day among its remaining members. Specifically, who will take care of the queue of voters at the entrance to the voting center? Who will check the voter's hand to see if she's already been marked with the special ink? Who will mark the voter's finger with ink? And who will be present near the ballot boxes to orient the voter to cast the ballot paper in the correct box? The VC Commission uses Model 01V KQV to record these assignments, as well as in the meeting book. Before the opening, the chair will also seal the ballot boxes. The chair should demonstrate to all present that the boxes are clearly empty, and then secure each lid with the security seals. Numbers of the security seals are recorded in both the meeting book and the record of sealing the ballot boxes, Form PV KQV 07. The original record of sealing is then placed in the special envelope for this purpose and dropped inside the empty ballot box. All procedures must be completed prior to 7 o'clock. The VC Commission takes a decision to open the voting center by using Decision Model 02V KQV, and at 7 o'clock the voting center is officially open. Remember, all of the opening steps described here may be viewed by accredited observers. Let's review. At what time should observers arrive at the voting center on Election Day if they wish to verify all opening procedures? A. 8 o'clock, B. 7 o'clock, C. 6 o'clock, D. 15 minutes before the voting begins. The correct answer is C, about 1 hour before the voting begins, or at 6 o'clock. If you're an observer and wish to view the opening procedures in full, be sure to arrive in time. What is the distance from the voting center where no campaign materials or campaigning is allowed on the day of election? A. 100 meters, B. 150 meters, C. 200 meters, or D. 300 meters? The correct choice is B. 150 meters. Lesson 4, Voting. In this lesson, we will go over arrival in the voting center, verification of voters' identity and eligibility to vote, issuing the ballots. Ready? There's a lot of information here, so feel free to stop and review the material as needed. Voting takes place from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Election Day. Only VC Commission members, citizens in the process of voting, and accredited media and observers are allowed inside the voting center during this time. Candidates are not permitted to be present at the voting center unless, of course, they are voting. Voters who have already voted should not remain in the voting center, and police officers are not permitted inside the voting center unless called in by a VC Commission decision. A voter will enter the voting center and go directly to the Voting Center Commission. He gives his name and presents either the Albanian identity card or passport. It is the chair who must verify the voter's identity and find the voter's personal information in the voter's list. If the voter is in the list, his identity data is verified against the data in the voter's list, and he is checked to be sure he is the same person as in the ID. The chair records the type and number of the identity document in the voter's list directly and draws a line through the name of the voter in the voter list. If a person is not found in the voter's list, he is not permitted to vote, except in a few special cases you will learn about later. Maybe the voter has gone to the wrong center, or maybe he simply isn't registered. Regardless, he must leave the voting center immediately. As the voter's identity is being checked in the list, Another member of the VC Commission checks the voter on both hands to make sure they have not already been marked with the special ink. Next, the voter must sign the list beside his name. Another member of the VC Commission should then ink the left hand of the voter with the special marker. The mark should be placed on the left thumb of the voter at the bottom of the nail or cuticle. A voter will then be issued 2 ballots by the secretary, one for mayor and one for municipal council. Before giving the voter ballots, they must be stamped twice on the reverse side, once by the chair with the chair stamp, and once by the secretary with the voting center stamp. The voter immediately proceeds alone to the voting booth and marks next to the name of the electoral subject of his or her choice. The voter should fold the ballots after making his choice in such a way that the voter's choice is not visible to VC Commission members, observers, or other voters, but at the same time, one of the 2 stamps on the reverse side remains visible. After coming out of the voting booth, the voter should be led to cast each ballot in the correct box for the mayor and for the municipal council. The voter must then immediately leave the voting center. That was easy, right? During the election day, you may see a few situations where procedures will be slightly different. We will go over these in the following lesson. Let's review. Which hand is checked for ink by a member of the VC Commission? A, left, B, right, C, both. The correct answer is C. While the voter is inked on his left hand, the VC Commission must check both hands of the voter for ink prior to issuing a ballot. Which is the only election document which should be marked with the stamp of the voting center chair? A, the ballot, B, the voter's list, C, the identification document of the voter, or D, the record of closing? The correct answer is A. The only time a stamp of the chair should be applied is on the reverse side of the ballot as it is issued to a voter. Put the following steps in the correct order. A, a voter is checked for ink. B, a voter states his name and presents his ID. C, a voter is issued a ballot. D, the voter signs the voter list. E, a voter is inked. The correct order is B, A, D, E, C. This order is actually very important. Take the time that you need to review the lesson if it's not quite clear. Lesson 5. Special Situations. In this lesson, we will go through some situations that may occur during the election day in a voting center. As an observer, you should be aware of these situations and how the VC Commission addresses them. For example, if a voter was not on the voters list but has obtained a court decision recognizing her right to vote in that voting center, then she has the right to vote. Here, the VC Commission will use the special register to record the voter's name, father's name, date of birth, identity document number, as well as the number of the court decision. Another situation that sometimes happens is that a voter for physical reasons may be unable to perform the voting procedures all by himself. In such cases, he may request the assistance of either a family member or another voter in the voter's list for that voting center. But before this can happen, the person chosen to assist should sign a statement in the voting center's meeting book that she will vote as instructed, not influence the voter, not disclose the voter's choice, and has not assisted another voter in this way. Note, both voters must be present in the voting center when this declaration is signed. A person may assist only one voter. VC Commission members may not assist voters in this manner, and the ballot paper must still be marked only inside of the voting booth. VC Commission members are also entitled to vote at the center where they are working. All members will vote immediately after the voting is finished, in other words, not before 7 p.m. This process is noted in the meeting book with a signed statement by each commissioner that they have not voted in their home voting center. Their names and ID numbers are recorded in the special register. Got it? Now, there are still a few more situations that may arise during the day that the VC Commission must know how to deal with. Let's look at those now. What if a voter is already inked? If a voter is already inked, the secretary must record her identity details in the meeting book. The voter is not allowed to vote, and she must leave the voting center. What if a voter refuses to be inked? In such cases, the secretary should record the incident and the voter's identity details in the meeting book. The voter will not be provided a ballot. There are also a few cases where the voter may need a second or replacement ballot. If the voter is seen marking the ballot paper outside the voting booth, the voter should not be allowed to put the ballot paper in the box. The chair should issue the voter another ballot or ballots if they have marked both ballots in this manner. If a voter mismarks or damages a ballot paper accidentally, he can also request a second ballot paper. If a voter is seen taking a photo of his ballot paper in the voting booth, the chair should take this ballot from the voter and issue a new ballot. In each of these cases, the chair must write "spoiled" across the back of the ballot and places it in the envelope "spoiled ballot papers." If the voter does any of these things a second time, the second ballot paper is also marked as spoiled and placed in the envelope "spoiled ballot papers." If this happens, the voter is not issued another ballot. Let's review. Which of the following groups of individuals must the VC Commission record in the special register on Election Day? A. Those who are not found on the voter list but have a court decision authorizing them to vote in that center. B. Those who are not found on the voter list but sign a statement that they wish to vote at this center. C. Voters who require assistance from another voter. D. Members of the VC Commission who vote. E. All of the above. This was a hard one. The correct choices are A and D. Choice C is not correct because a voter who requires assistance will be included in the voter list. The details of the person assisting the voter are recorded in the meeting book, not the special register. Choice B is simply not allowed. If you got this right, you're pretty ready to observe. Let's try another hard one. In what cases can a voter be issued a second ballot? A. If the voter marks the ballot outside the voting booth. B. If the voter is seen taking a photo of her ballot. C. If the voter makes a mistake on the ballot and requests a new one. D. All of the above. The answer is D. All of the above. Remember, in the case of marking the ballot outside the booth and taking a photo of the ballot, the VC Commission should not allow the voter to cast their ballot and issue another ballot paper to the voter. Lesson 6. Closing of voting. Almost done now. In this lesson, we will go over ending the voting process, the record of closing, Model PV08KQV, sealing the ballot boxes, and election materials box. Ready? Voting centers close at 7 p.m. Any voter who arrives at the center after this time should not be permitted to vote. Voters who were in line by 7 p.m. but have not been able to vote because of a queue of voters will still be permitted to vote. However, the secretary or a member of the opposite political affiliation to that of the chair should collect the identification documents of all the voters who are present by 7 p.m. and then call them one by one to finish the voting. Under no circumstances should voters who join the queue after identification documents have been collected be permitted to vote. After the last person present has voted, probably a member of the commission, the VC Commission makes a decision for closing of the polls and completes Model 07 KQV. This decision and time is written in the meeting book. The chair must then close the special register so no additional names can be added. She does this by making a note on the register. This register is closed with number in figures and in words and signs it. At this point, only the VC Commission, accredited party and non-governmental organization observers, foreign observers, and the accredited media may remain inside the voting center. Together with the members of the VC Commission, the chair then counts the number of voters who have voted according to their signatures on the voter list, as well as those who are in the special register, states this figure aloud to other members of the Commission and any observers present, invites them to verify the figure stated by her, instructs the Secretary of the Commission to record in the meeting book the number of voters and to complete the record of closing, PV KQV 08. If any member has objections on the declared number, this is recorded in the meeting book and the record of closing. In the record of closing and in the meeting book, the Secretary then records the number of persons who voted in the voting center, the number of ballots issued to the voting center based on Form PV KQV 05 for both the mayor and municipal council, the number of women voters. Then the chair counts the unused ballot papers and informs members and observers of these totals, counting first the unused ballots for mayor, second the unused ballots for municipal council. If requested by another member of the VC Commission, the chair is obliged to restart the count of the unused ballots. These totals are then recorded in the record of closing PV KQV 08 and meeting book. Unused ballots are then placed in an envelope labeled Unused Ballot Papers. The chair then counts the spoiled ballots that are found in the envelope marked Spoiled Ballot Papers. Again, first, the spoiled mayor ballots, and then second, the spoiled ballots for municipal council. These totals are again written in the record of closing and the meeting book. If any of the observers have objections to any of these figures, those are recorded in the meeting book. Next, the Secretary of the VC Commission places inside the box of election materials the following: the envelopes, unused ballot papers, and spoiled ballot papers, the voter list and the special register, the original copies of the VC Commission decisions and any unused decision templates. The Secretary of the VC Commission, in the record of closing and in the meeting book, notes the following: the number of the 5th security code to be used to close the ballot box for the mayor, the number of the 5th security code to be used to close the ballot box for the municipal council, the 4 numbers of the security codes to be used to close the box of voting materials. When these actions are done, the Secretary marks the exact time of closing this whole process in the record of closing of polls PV KQV 08. The original and a copy of the record are then placed inside 2 separate envelopes marked for the record of sealing the ballot boxes. One envelope with the original is then placed in the ballot box for mayor. Another envelope with a copy is then placed in the ballot box for municipal council. Another envelope with copies is also placed inside the election materials box. Still paying attention? The closing of the voting is almost finished. The VC Commission then places the 2 remaining black security seals on the part where the ballot papers are inserted, first on the ballot box for mayor and second on the ballot box for municipal council. If observers choose to make any remarks on the above steps, they can be recorded directly in the meeting book or are submitted separately in writing. The remaining items are then placed inside the box of election materials: the stamp of the VC Commission, the stamp of the chair, any unused and damaged seals, and the meeting book. The VC Commission then uses the 4 seals for the election materials box to fasten the lid tightly on the box. Copies of the record of closing, model PV KQV 08, should be given to VC Commission members and observers if requested. Now we are finished. Well, not quite. To complete the process, the VC Commission now needs to hand the materials back to the CEAZ for the counting. If you are supposed to follow this process, you can learn about it in the next lesson. Let's review. True or false? A voter in some circumstances will be allowed to vote after 7 p.m. It's actually true. While voting ends at 7, any eligible voter who is already in the queue to vote by 7 will be allowed to vote. What is the correct order for the VC Commission to do the following items? A. The unused ballot papers are counted. B. The spoiled ballot papers are counted. C. The chair counts the number of voters who have voted according to the voters list and the special register. D. The box of election materials is sealed. E. Seals are placed on top of the 2 ballot boxes. The correct order is C, A, B, E, D. It is critical the VC Commission complete these steps in the correct order. Please go over this process again if you are not quite certain. When counting unused or spoiled ballots, which should be counted first, the municipal council or the mayor? The mayor. Typically for these repeated processes, such as counting unused ballots, sealing the boxes, and so on, the mayor will be done before the municipal council. Which of the following is placed inside the ballot box before it is sealed? A, the spoiled ballots envelope, B, the special register, C, the meeting book, D, the record model PV KQV 08, E, all of the above. The correct answer is D, the record model PV KQV 08. This is the only item the VC Commission should place inside the ballot box for mayor and municipal council during the closing process. All of the other materials listed are placed in the box of election materials. Lesson 7. Handover of the materials. The Voting Center Commission will complete its duties on Election Day by making the official handover of materials to the CEAZ. We will briefly go over transporting the ballot boxes and election materials to the ballot counting center, official handover of the ballot boxes and election materials. Ready? After completing all the steps to close the voting center, the ballot boxes, the box with the election materials, and the voting booths are sent by the VC Commission immediately to the ballot counting center. This delivery is made by the VC Commission Chair, the Secretary, any other Commission member who wishes, and a police officer. Observers may also follow the materials in their own vehicles all the way to the point of the handover. After arriving at the ballot counting center, the receipt of the ballot boxes and the box of election materials is recorded by the CEAZ in the model PV KZAZ 09. A copy of this record is then handed to the chair of the VC Commission, the secretary of the commission, and the police officer who has accompanied the materials. At this point, observation moves to inside the ballot counting center. If you are planning to do this, please refer to the Electoral Code and other materials available from the CEC or your organization. Let's review. True or false, it is permissible for the voting center to deliver materials to the ballot counting center on the following day, as long as it is within 12 hours of the close of the polls. False. The voting center should immediately bring materials to the ballot counting center without delay. By law, this should not be later than 3 hours after the voting ends. Which of the following is a correct group of people who can accompany the materials to the ballot counting center? The secretary and any other member who wants to do so? The secretary and police and any other members? Only the chair and the police? The chair, secretary, police, and any other member and observer who wants to do so? The correct answer is D. At a minimum, the chair, secretary, and police must accompany materials from the voting center to the ballot counting center. If other members choose to do so, they can also accompany the materials, as can observers. This part of observing on the election day is finished. The CEC of Albania is grateful for your service.